in the heart of the twin-sunned world of Velara, where crystalline spires pierced violet skies and rivers of liquid light wound through gardens of bioluminescent flora. The royal palace of Queen Zyra stood like a dream carved from moonstone and starlight. Its walls shimmered with ancient glyphs that pulsed in time with the planet's twin hearts, two colossal energy cores buried deep beneath the capital. Within its grand audience chamber, silence had become a rare and fragile thing, shattered only by the low hum of hovering sentinels and the occasional rustle of silk robes worn by the High Council. But today, that silence cracked like glass beneath the weight of a single impossible question. Queen Zyra of the Silthari, blue-skinned, white-haired, with eyes like molten silver and a crown of living crystal that coiled around her temples like frozen lightning, stood before the kneeling figure of a human warrior named Joran. He was not clad in the gleaming armor of Velari nobles, but in the battered, scorched battle gear of the Terran Alliance. Blackened plating, a dented chestplate bearing the insignia of the 7th Desert Battalion, and boots still dusted with the rust-red sands of the Kara wastes, where human and Silthari forces had fought side by side against the Devourer swarm just weeks before. His face was lean, sun-weathered, and streaked with old scars, but his eyes, brown as Earth's soil after rain, held a quiet steadiness that had, against all cosmic odds, captured the heart of an alien queen. Zyra's voice, usually a blade wrapped in velvet, trembled as she spoke. "What do I have to do to marry a human?" The words hung in the air like a detonation waiting to ignite. Gasps rippled through the chamber. One elder counselor dropped his ceremonial orb. Another clutched his chest as if struck. To the Silthari, humans were volatile, short-lived, emotionally chaotic beings, noble in battle, yes, but far too fragile for royal entanglement. And yet, here stood their immortal queen, who had ruled for 3 centuries, who had never once shown interest in a consort, now confessing desire for a man whose lifespan barely matched one of her courtly seasons. Joran remained kneeling, not out of submission, but out of respect, a gesture he'd learned during his months stationed on Velara as part of the post-war alliance. He hadn't expected this, not after the quiet moments they'd shared. Late-night strategy sessions that turned into whispered conversations about Earth's oceans and Silthari sky dances, shared meals where he'd fumbled with utensils shaped like singing birds, and the night she'd healed his plasma burns with her own bioluminescent blood, her touch leaving trails of warmth that lingered long after the wounds closed. He'd felt something shift between them, yes, but never imagined it would echo in a royal decree. The High Chancellor, a wizened Silthari named Vorin with skin the color of storm clouds and eyes like obsidian beads, stepped forward. "Your Radiance," he said, voice tight with disbelief. "The blood concord forbids union between Silthari royalty and off-world species. It is written in the first codex. The throne must remain pure, lest the stars forget our name." Zyra turned slowly, her white hair catching the light like spun frost. "The codex was written when we believed we were alone in the galaxy," she replied, her tone sharpening. "Now we share skies with humans, Krellans, and even the reformed swarm. If purity means isolation, then I choose impurity. If tradition means loneliness, then I choose Joran." A murmur rose, half outrage, half awe. No queen had ever defied the Concord so openly. But Zyra was not like her predecessors. She had led her people through the Devourer War not from a throne, but from the front lines, her energy whip carving arcs of blue fire through the enemy hordes. She had stood shoulder to shoulder with human soldiers when the swarm breached the citadel of Zal, and it was Joran who had dragged her from the rubble after the final blast, his own leg shattered, his voice hoarse from shouting her name. Now, in the echoing stillness of the palace, Joran finally rose. "Your Majesty," he began, voice rough but clear. "I'm just a soldier. I don't know your laws, your rituals, or whether my heart is even worthy of your crown. But if there's a path, any path, I'll walk it, even if it leads through fire." Zyra's lips curved into the faintest smile, the kind that made her silver eyes glow like twin moons. "Then we begin," she said. "But know this, Joran of Earth. The path to my hand is not paved with roses. It is paved with trials. 3 trials set by the Council, designed to test not just your strength, but your spirit, your loyalty, and your love. Fail one, and the bond is severed forever. Succeed, and you will not only become my consort, you will become the first human ever granted the mark of the twin hearts, a symbol that binds soul to soul across lifetimes." The Council exchanged uneasy glances. The trials had not been invoked in over 500 years. They were brutal, often fatal. But tradition demanded they be offered if a queen insisted on an outsider. Vorin bowed stiffly. "So be it. The trials of union shall commence at the next lunar convergence. 3 days hence. In the days that followed, the palace buzzed with tension. Human diplomats scrambled to understand the implications. Silthry nobles whispered behind jeweled fans, and Joran trained relentlessly in the royal spire gardens, sparring with holographic warriors, meditating under the twin suns, and studying Silthry customs with the help of a surprisingly kind librarian named Lyra, who had a soft spot for stubborn offworlders. Zyra watched him from afar, her heart a storm of hope and fear. She had not told him everything. The final trial required a sacrifice neither of them might survive. And worse, there were those in the court who would rather see her dead than mated to a human. On the eve of the first trial, Joran found Zyra on the sky balcony, where the air smelled of night-blooming starvins and the twin moons cast overlapping shadows across her face. "Why me?" he asked quietly. "You could have any Silthry noble, any warrior from a dozen allied species. Why a human with 10 years left in him, maybe less?" She turned to him, her hand brushing his cheek with fingers cool as river stone. "Because you see me," she said. "Not the queen, not the weapon, just Zyra. And because when the swarm came, you didn't ask if I was worth saving. You just saved me." The first trial began at dawn, held in the Arena of Echoes, a vast amphitheater carved into the side of a floating mountain. The challenge was simple in name, impossible in execution: the trial of endurance. Joran was to survive one full cycle of Velara's twin suns without food, water, or rest, while enduring illusions designed to break his mind. The arena floor shimmered with neural sand that fed on fear, conjuring phantoms of his past. Fallen comrades, burning cities, his own mother's voice calling him home. But Joran had faced worse in the Kara wastes. He focused on Zyra's voice, the memory of her laughter during their first shared meal, when he'd accidentally insulted her favorite dessert by calling it glowy pudding. He laughed then, even as phantom claws raked his skin, and the illusions faltered. When the suns finally set, he stood, exhausted, bleeding, but unbroken. The crowd, once skeptical, roared in stunned approval. The second trial, the trial of loyalty, took place in the Chamber of Whispers beneath the palace. There, Joran was presented with a choice: accept a vial of essence of longevity, a rare Silthry serum that could extend his life to match Zyra's, or destroy it to prove he sought her love, not immortality. Hidden observers watched from mirrored walls, ready to strike if he showed greed. But Joran didn't hesitate. He smashed the vial on the floor, the glowing liquid sizzling like rain on hot metal. "I'd rather have 10 years with her than 1,000 without," he said. The chamber fell silent. Even Vorin looked away, touched despite himself. But the third trial loomed like a storm on the horizon. The trial of sacrifice, the oldest and most feared. No one knew its exact nature. It changed with each suitor, tailored to their deepest bond. The night before, Zyra summoned Joran to the Heart Vault, where the twin planetary cores pulsed beneath a dome of transparent crystal. "This trial," she whispered, "will ask you to choose between me and your people, or perhaps between your life and mine. Cannot tell you more. The vault decides." As they stood there, a tremor shook the palace. Alarms blared. Red light flooded the corridors. Scouts reported a devourer remnant thought eradicated had breached the outer shield, led by a rogue Silthry warlord named Kael'thar, who believed Zyra's alliance with humans had made the throne weak. "He seeks to claim the cores," Zyra said, her voice hardening. "If he succeeds, Velara dies, and Earth will be next." In the chaos that followed, the council declared the trials suspended. But Zyra refused. "The trial of sacrifice begins now," she announced over the palace comms. "And it is this Joran must choose: defend the palace and risk his life beside me, or flee to the human embassy and ensure Earth's safety by warning them of Kael'thar's fleet." Joran didn't hesitate. He grabbed his plasma rifle, checked the charge, and met Zyra's gaze. "I'm not leaving you," he said. "Not again." What followed was a battle unlike any Velara had seen. Kael'thar's forces, half machine, half fanatic, swarmed the palace gates. Joran fought with the ferocity of a man who had nothing left to lose, his human grit blending with Silthry energy weapons in a deadly dance. Zyra unleashed her full power, her blue skin glowing with inner light, her white hair whipping like a banner of war. Together, they held the grand staircase, back to back, human and alien, mortal and immortal. But Kael'thar was cunning. He activated a resonance bomb beneath the Heart Vault, set to destabilize the cores. The only way to stop it was to manually recalibrate the harmonic stabilizers. a task requiring two beings of opposite energies. One Silthari, one human. Zyra knew this. So did Joran. They ran through collapsing corridors, dodging falling debris and enemy fire, until they reached the control nexus. There, Zyra placed her hands on the Silthari interface, her energy flaring blue. Joran placed his on the human-modified panel, his biosignature syncing with the ancient machine. The system demanded balance. Too much Silthari energy, and the cores would implode. Too much human, and they'd explode. They had to harmonize not just their actions, but their wills, their fears, their love. As the countdown ticked, Joran looked at Zyra. "I'd marry you in a heartbeat," he said. "If we survive this." She smiled through tears of light. "Then survive, my love. For both our worlds." Their hands glowed, one blue, one gold, and the machine hummed into stillness. The bomb disarmed. Kael'thar, seeing his plan fail, fled into the storm-racked skies. In the aftermath, the palace lay in ruins, but the people were alive. The council gathered once more in the rebuilt audience chamber, humbled by what they had witnessed. Vorin stepped forward, holding the crown of twin hearts, a circlet of intertwined silver and obsidian. "The trials are complete," he declared, voice thick with emotion. "Not by ancient right, but by fire, loyalty, and sacrifice. Joran of Earth, you have not only won the Queen's hand, you have earned the heart of Velara." Zyra took his hands before the entire court. "So," she said, eyes shining, "what do you say, human warrior? Will you marry an alien queen?" Joran, bruised but grinning, squeezed her fingers. "Only if you promise to never serve me glowy pudding again." Laughter rang through the hall, human, Silthari, and something entirely new, born of two worlds choosing each other, not in spite of their differences, but because of them. And as the twin suns rose over the healing spires of Velara, casting long shadows that intertwined like lovers' fingers, the story of the Blue Queen and the Desert Soldier was only just beginning. The wedding preparations began under a sky still scarred by the smoke of battle. But peace on Velara was as fragile as spun glass. Though Joran had passed the trials and earned the people's reluctant admiration, not all wounds healed with ceremony. Whispers slithered through the palace corridors. Some nobles claimed the union was a political blunder. Others muttered that Zyra had been bewitched by human pheromones or Terran mind tech. But the true threat came not from within the court, but from beyond the stars. 3 solar cycles after the trials, as artisans wove starlight silk into Joran's ceremonial tunic and Zyra's crown, was reforged to include a single human-made titanium band, a symbol of unity. Deep space scanners picked up an anomaly. A fleet, massive and silent, emerged from the Veil Nebula. Not devourers, not allies, human. Earth's high command had arrived. Joran's blood ran cold when he saw the insignia, the Black Hawk of the Terran Purification Fleet, a radical faction that had long opposed interspecies alliances, calling them genetic contamination. Their admiral, a hardline ideologue named Valerius Croft, broadcast a message across all channels. "Surrender the alien queen and her human collaborator. The union is null under Terran Law Code Omega. Resistance will be met with orbital cleansing." Zyra stood beside Joran on the observation deck, her fingers laced tightly with his. "They see love as treason," she murmured. "They see anything they don't control as treason," Joran replied grimly. He knew Croft, had served under him briefly before deserting during the Kara Wastes campaign when Croft ordered the bombing of a refugee convoy, just in case it harbored swarm scouts. Joran had reported him. Croft had never forgotten. The Silthari Council panicked. Some urged Zyra to exile Joran to save the planet. Others proposed surrendering him in chains. But Zyra, her eyes blazing with regal fire, silenced them all. "If Earth comes for him, they come for me. And if they come for me, they face the full might of Velara, and every allied world that stands with us." Yet even as warships powered up and defense grids activated, a stranger arrived at the palace gates. Not in a warcraft, but in a battered civilian shuttle bearing no markings. The pilot was human, female, with cybernetic eyes and a scar that ran from temple to jaw. She carried a sealed data core and one name: "Tell Joran, it's Mira." Mira had been Joran's squadmate in the 7th Battalion, his closest friend, presumed dead in the swarm's final assault on Outpost Theta. When they embraced in the palace's Hall of Mirrors, tears streaked through the dust on Joran's face. "You're alive," he choked out. "Barely," she said. "Croft left me for dead. But I found something worse than death out there." She handed him the data core. He's not just here to stop your wedding. He's here to steal the twin cores. The cores, it turned out, weren't just planetary stabilizers. They were ancient artifacts, remnants of a precursor race capable of bending spacetime. Croft believed that by harnessing their energy, he could purify the galaxy by erasing all non-human civilizations in a single temporal reset. And he'd brought a weapon to do it. The Chronolance, a prototype device built from scavenged swarm tech and forbidden Earth research. Zyra's face paled. If he activates it near the cores, it won't just destroy Velara. Could unravel causality itself. Past, present, future, gone. Worse still, Mira revealed a betrayal within the palace. One of Zyra's own blood relatives, her cousin, Prince Dalon, had been feeding Croft intelligence, hoping that with Zyra gone and Joran executed, he could seize the throne and broker a saner alliance with Earth's orthodox factions. Dalon had already disabled key shield harmonics and planted resonance beacons to guide the Chronolance targeting array. That night, under the cover of a double eclipse, Joran, Zyra, and Mira launched a desperate counter-operation. While Silthri loyalists staged a diversion at the northern gate, the trio infiltrated the Heart Vault to reinforce the core's shielding. But Dalon was waiting. Flanked by mercenary cyborgs and wielding a stolen royal energy scythe, he blocked their path in the Crystal Nexus. "You shame our bloodline," Dalon hissed at Zyra, his blue skin mottled with rage. "Marrying a short-lived ape while our people bleed? You've made us a joke." "I made us human," Zyra shot back. "Something you'll never understand." The fight that followed was brutal. Mira, despite her cybernetic limbs, took a plasma bolt to the chest protecting Joran. Zyra dueled Dalon with whip and will, their familial bond twisting every strike into agony. And Joran, armed only with a pulse knife and raw desperation, scaled the energy conduits to reach the core's primary regulator. Just as Croft's flagship, the Purifier, broke orbit and launched the Chronolance. Time seemed to slow as the weapon descended, a spear of fractured light tearing through the atmosphere. Alarms screamed. The ground trembled. In the vault, Joran's hands flew over the controls, rerouting power through emergency channels Zyra had shown him during their first night together. "Just in case," she'd said with a wink. Now that just in case was their only hope. But the system required a living conduit, someone to channel the core's energy directly. Silthri could do it, but it would burn out their neural pathways. Humans weren't built for it at all. Yet Joran didn't hesitate. "Do it," he told Zyra, pressing his palm to the interface. "Link me." "No," she cried. "You'll die." "Then I die married," he said, pulling her close for one last kiss, fierce, sweet, and full of everything words couldn't hold. Zyra, tears streaming down her face, activated the bond. Energy surged through Joran like liquid lightning. His veins glowed gold. His eyes blazed with starlight. And for one impossible moment, human and Silthri biology fused into something new. A bridge between species, between mortality and eternity. The Chronolance struck. But instead of detonating, it sang. The cores absorbed its temporal charge, then reflected it back in a wave of harmonic resonance that didn't destroy, but rewrote. Croft's fleet froze in mid-air, their systems rebooting with peaceful protocols. Dalon collapsed, his memories of hatred overwritten by empathy. And across the galaxy, every devourer remnant, every dormant war machine, powered down as if hearing a lullaby from the dawn of time. When the light faded, Joran lay unconscious in Zyra's arms, his body frail but breathing. The cores pulsed gently, now humming with a dual rhythm, blue and gold, alien and human. Days later, in a quiet garden beneath the twin suns, the wedding finally took place. Not in the grand hall, but among the Starvins, with only those who had bled for their love in attendance. Mira, wrapped in healing bandages. Vorin, who now bowed not out of duty but respect. Even Dalon, humbled and silent, standing at the edge of the gathering like a penitent ghost. Zyra wore a gown woven from battlefield banners, Silthri silk and Terran parachute cloth. Joran wore his old uniform, cleaned and patched, with the mark of the twin hearts now glowing softly on his chest, a permanent bond etched into his very cells. As the officiant, a reprogrammed devourer drone that now served as a peace ambassador, intoned the vows in a voice like wind through crystal chimes. Joran whispered, "Still think I'm just a soldier?" Zyra smiled, her silver eyes shimmering. "You're my soldier, my heart, my forever." But as they hugged beneath the blooming vines, a faint signal blinked on Myra's wrist comm. A distress call from the outer rim. Coordinates unknown. Message fragmented. "They're waking up. The first ones." Not precursors, prisoners. Joran and Zyra exchanged a glance. The universe, it seemed, wasn't done with them yet. And somewhere beyond the edge of known space, something ancient stirred. Something that had built the cores not as power sources, but as locks. And the key was their union. The distress signal led them not to a distant star system, but to the heart of the galaxy's oldest mystery. The Silent Ring, a colossal orbital structure buried in the dust clouds of the Cygnus Rift, long dismissed as a dead relic. Now, it pulsed with the same dual-frequency rhythm as the twin cores. Blue and gold, alien and human. The signal hadn't come from a ship or a colony. It had come from inside the ring itself, and it bore the genetic signature of both Zyra and Joran, imprinted the moment their bond had harmonized the cores during the Chronolance strike. With Mira piloting a cloaked scout vessel and a small crew of loyal Silthri and human engineers, they breached the ring's outer shell. Inside, they found not ruins, but a living archive, a vault of light and memory built by the so-called First Ones, who were neither gods nor creators, but guardians. Millennia ago, they had imprisoned a cosmic entity known as the Hollow, a being of pure entropy that fed on division, war, and isolation. The twin cores weren't power sources. They were anchors, stabilizing the prison across dimensions. And the mark of the twin hearts? Not a symbol of love alone, but a key forged from unity between two disparate species. Something the Hollow could not corrupt, for it had no concept of selfless bond. The distress call had been a failsafe. The Chronolance temporal surge had cracked the prison seal. The Hollow was waking. Back on Velara, strange things began to happen. Dreams turned to nightmares. Allies turned on each other over imagined slights. Even the twin suns seemed to dim, as if the light itself were growing weary. The Hollow didn't attack with weapons. It eroded trust, amplified fear, turned love into suspicion. It whispered in the silence between heartbeats. You don't belong together. She will outlive you. He will betray you. Your love is a mistake. Joran woke one night to find Zyra standing at the balcony's edge, her back to him, her white hair stirring in a wind that didn't exist. What if I'm wrong? She whispered, not turning. What if our union isn't strength, but weakness, a flaw in the design? He crossed the room slowly, remembering the first time he'd seen her, not as a queen, but as a woman tending wounded soldiers in a field hospital, her hands glowing as she mended broken bones. Then let's be beautifully flawed together, he said, taking her hand. Because I'd rather be wrong with you than right without you. That simple truth, spoken not in grand vows, but in quiet certainty, sent a ripple through the palace. The nightmares receded. The suns brightened. On the silent ring, the archive responded, the final chamber opened. Inside, they found two thrones, not of stone or metal, but of intertwined roots and starlight. The archive's voice, ancient and gentle, spoke. Only those who choose each other, again and again, in the face of doubt, can reseal the Hollow. Not by force, by vow. Joran and Zyra sat. The mark on their chests flared. Energy flowed, not from them, but through them, a current of shared will, memory, and love. They didn't speak the words aloud. They lived them. Every scar, every laugh, every moment they'd chosen each other over fear. The ring hummed, the prison sealed. The Hollow screamed into the void, trapped once more by the one force it could never comprehend. Unity born of difference. When they returned to Velara, the world was healing. Not just from war, but from the subtle poison of division. Humans and Silthri worked side by side rebuilding the spires. Children of both species played in the gardens, and the old blood concord was rewritten, not as a law of purity, but as a covenant of connection. Months later, under a sky dusted with auroras from the newly stabilized cores, Joran and Zyra stood before their people. Not as queen and consort, but as partners. Their wedding, delayed but never denied, was celebrated across 3 worlds. There were feasts of glowy pudding, which Joran now claimed was kinda delicious, dances that blended Terran folk steps with Silthri sky whirls, and toasts that lasted until dawn. Years passed. Joran's hair grayed, but his eyes never lost their warmth. Zyra's immortality remained, but she no longer feared time, because every moment with him was a lifetime. And when, decades later, their first child was born, a girl with blue-tinged skin, white curls, and eyes the color of Earth's oceans, they named her Lyra, after the song the cores sang when love held the universe together. They built a home not in the palace, but on the edge of the Kara wastes, where the red sands met the green valleys of peace. There, they raised their children, 3 in all, teaching them stories of war and wonder, of a human who loved an alien queen, and an alien queen who believed in a human soldier. And when Joran's time finally came, old and full of years, he didn't die alone. Zyra held him as the twin suns set, her tears falling like liquid starlight onto his weathered face. "You were my always," she whispered. He smiled, fingers brushing her cheek one last time. "And you'll be mine, in every life after." But death, it turned out, wasn't the end, not for them. The mark of the twin hearts, fused with the core's energy, carried his essence into the planetary consciousness. On quiet nights, Zyra would walk the gardens and feel his hand in hers, hear his laugh in the wind. And sometimes, when their grandchildren asked about the stars, she'd point to the brightest one and say, "That's Papa, watching over us." Peace endured, not because war was impossible, but because love had proven stronger. And in the heart of Velara, in a home filled with laughter and light, the story of the Blue Queen and the Desert Soldier lived on. Not as legend, but as legacy. They had asked once what it took to marry across worlds. The answer wasn't in trials or treaties. It was in showing up, day after day, choosing each other even when the universe tried to pull them apart. And in that choice, they didn't just build a marriage. They built a future where humans and aliens didn't just coexist, but belonged together. Years melted into decades like sand through gentle fingers, and the little home on the edge of the Kara wastes grew louder, brighter, and fuller with every passing season. What began as a quiet refuge for 2 souls who defied galaxies became a bustling hearth of laughter, chaos, and love. Because Joran and Zyra didn't just have one child. They had 7. Lyra, the eldest, inherited her mother's silver eyes and her father's stubborn grin. She could recalibrate a plasma turret before breakfast and recite Earth lullabies in perfect Silthery by sunset. Then came Kaelin, no relation to any forbidden names, who had Zyra's luminous blue skin but Joran's unruly brown hair that refused to stay combed, no matter how many biostatic brushes the palace sent. He dreamed of flying starships, not as a soldier, but as an explorer mapping peace treaties between fledgling worlds. Twins Morel and Soren arrived next. Morel with snow-white hair like her mother and a temper that could melt Durasteel. Soren with golden-flecked skin, a hybrid trait no healer had predicted, and an uncanny talent for calming agitated sky lizards with nothing but a hum. After them came little Nessa, quiet and watchful, who spoke only in riddles until age 5, then revealed she could hear the whispers of the twin cores themselves. The youngest 2, Rian and Elo, were inseparable terrors who once rewired the palace's gravity generator to make their toys float during dinner, much to Voran's exasperated delight. The palace, once a place of rigid ceremony, became a joyful mess. Holographic storybooks floated beside half-eaten plates of glowy pudding, now a family favorite. Tiny handprints, some blue, some tan, some shimmering in between, decorated the crystal walls. Joran taught them earth ballads and how to throw a proper punch. Zyra taught them star navigation and the ancient art of soul bonding through shared dreams. They celebrated Terran birthdays with cake and Silthery naming days with sky dances, and every year, on the anniversary of the Chronolance strike, they gathered in the garden to light lanterns shaped like hearts, blue, gold, and every shade in between. Even as Joran's steps slowed and his hair turned fully silver, his spirit never dimmed. He'd sit on the veranda, surrounded by grandchildren, because Lyra married a kind-hearted Krellin botanist, and Kaelin fell for a human engineer for Mars Colony, and tell them exaggerated tales of how he once single-handedly defeated a devourer hive with a spoon and a really loud yell. Zyra would roll her eyes but never correct him. Some truths were better wrapped in joy. And when, at the ripe age of 93, ancient by human standards but still vibrant in heart and mind, Joran passed peacefully in his sleep with Zyra's hand in his and the scent of starvins drifting through the open window, the entire planet mourned. But it was not a sorrow steeped in loss. It was a celebration of a life that had changed everything. At his funeral, held not in marble halls but beneath the twin suns where they'd first confessed their love, all 7 children stood together, blue, gold, and beautifully in between, and sang a song that blended Terran folk melody with Silthery harmonic resonance. The twin cores pulsed in time, and for a moment, the sky shimmered with his face, smiling. Zyra did not fade into grief. She leaned into legacy. With her children and grandchildren at her side, she transformed the royal palace into the House of Bridges, a school where human, Silthery, and dozens of allied species learned not just science and strategy, but empathy, art, and the courage to love across differences. She wore Joran's old dog tags around her neck, polished smooth by time, and every night, She whispered to the stars, "Still with me, my desert soldier?" And sometimes, on the stillest nights, the wind would carry a familiar chuckle, or a child would say something so perfectly Joran like that Zyra would laugh through tears and say, "He's teaching you now." Generations came and went. The story of the Blue Queen and the human warrior became more than myth. It became a compass. New couples from warring species would visit the old home on the wastes, now preserved as a sanctuary, and leave tokens at the base of the twin sun tree Joran had planted on their first anniversary. Some said the tree bloomed gold in winter and blue in summer. Others swore its roots hummed the mark of the twin hearts. Zyra lived for 3 more centuries, not as a ruler, but as a grandmother of worlds. She held great-great-grandchildren in her arms, some with 4 arms, some with gills, some with wings, and told them, "Love is not about matching. It's about choosing, every day, to build something new together." When she finally stepped into the light of the cores at the end of her long, radiant life, it wasn't an end. The planetary consciousness, woven with Joran's essence and her own, welcomed her home. And there, in a realm beyond time, beneath skies that shimmered with every color their children had ever been, they met again. Not as queen and soldier, but as Joran and Zyra, hand in hand, forever young in the joy they'd made. Their legacy lived on, not in monuments, but in millions of everyday acts of courage and kindness across the galaxy. In mixed-species families sharing meals. In peace treaties signed with laughter. In children who never questioned whether love could cross stars, because their very existence proved it could. And so, in a universe once torn by fear, the Blue Queen and the human warrior left behind something far more powerful than empires or weapons. A family. Loud, messy, radiant, and endless. They had loved. They had fought. They had built. And in the end, they had so many kids and so much happiness that the stars themselves learned to smile.